All right, so we are starting to get even more information coming out on the complete failure of the cops who responded to the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas at Robb Elementary School. So I got an interview here that CNN, or I guess this is CBS News, was doing with one of the parents who actually disregarded police orders and ran into the school building while there was still this active shooting going on and got her kids out of their classroom while the police were basically standing on the sidelines and continuing to refuse to go into the school. So I wanted to play this clip in its entirety because this woman, first of all, is a complete badass, but on top of that, this is again just representative in terms of how much these cops were being cowards in this moment. So let's go ahead and watch this interview.
Arrest you because you're being very uncooperative. I said, well, you're gonna have to arrest me because I'm going in there, and I'm telling you right now, I don't see none of y'all in there. Y'all are standing with snipers and y'all are far away. If y'all don't go in there, I'm going in there. He immediately put me in cuffs.
She says after Uvalde police officers told marshals to uncuff Gomez, she ran towards the school.
As soon as they uncuffed me, I jumped that first gate fence. And once I jumped it, I went to my son's class and I knocked on the door, and I remember the teacher saying, I'm like, hey, they're already bolt cutting the fence to get me. She's like, you think we have time to get out? I said, y'all have time. I'm going to run for my other son.
Once she was assured her son was okay, Gomez ran to get her other child, encountering more officers who tried to stop her.
So I start yelling and I'm being uncooperative, and I'm like, well, y'all aren't doing what are y'all doing? Y'all ain't doing y'all need to be in here. Give me your vest. Somebody give me a vest, something. I started paying attention to how far the shots were being, so that I knew the shooter was all the way still by my first son's class. So when I went to my second son's door, the teacher didn't want to open the door for me. So that's when they started escorting me out. And as I see that they're opening my son's door, I go run for my son and I get him.
With both of her kids out safe, Gomez still can't shake the thought of those who didn't make it.
While you were inside the school, did you see officers
inside the school? There was not one officer inside the school when I ran to my second son's class. There was not one officer.
And you were hearing gunshots, so you knew that
you could hear the gunshots.
Was an active shooter.
It was still active. The gunshots were still active. They were not in there. There was no one in there. If anything, when I pulled up, my car was closer to the school than where the snipers and everybody that was laying on the ground were.
When you heard that it took law enforcement 75 minutes before they went in and stopped the shooter, what was your thinking, having been inside the school yourself?
I don't know. I was just thinking that they could have saved many more lives. They could have gone into that classroom and maybe 2 or 3 would have been gone, but they could have saved the whole class. They could have done something. Gone through the window, sniped them through the window. I mean, something, but nothing was being done. If anything, they were being more aggressive on us parents that were willing to go in there. And like I told one of the officers, I don't need you to protect me. Get away from me. I don't need your protection. If anything, I need you to go in there with me to go protect my kids. And if anything, they were being more aggressive on us. They were more pertained on keeping us back than getting into that school.
Right, so I mean, listen, on every different front, and again, we're still trying to get an accurate picture in terms of the exact timeline, in terms of how all of this unfolded, because it's been pretty much impossible as of, recently, because we've seen just so many lies after lies put forward by the Uvalde Police School District, as well as the Uvalde Police that were responding to this, as well as, I mean, you can go up and down the chain. We've just seen lies and contradictions throughout the entire aftermath of this shooting, basically because these cops are trying to cover their own asses and not look as badly as they actually were in this moment. So I mean, think about all of the different things that she was saying there, right? Which a number of them actually directly contradict the current narrative that has been put forward by the police, right? She says that when she went into the school to go and get her kids out, that there were no police when she went into the school. There were no police that were within the building while she was still hearing those shots go off, which is a direct contradiction to the narrative that we've been hearing from police, that they went in very quickly and then they were basically posted up outside in the hallway for nearly an hour before they decided to go in and confront the shooter. So again, kind of an unclear timeline on exactly what the accuracy of those narratives being put forward by the cops has been on that specific issue, but also just the fact that a parent, and we've seen this from multiple different parents' accounts that were on the ground at this time. We saw that picture in the videos of the police who were holding down the parents. They were making multiple arrests. She was clearly one of those arrests. They were, holding out their tasers officers are standing there with their long rifles and shit, literally putting more pressure, as she was just saying there, on the parents that were trying to go in to save their kids than they were on the actual shooter who was killing their kids inside. I mean, just completely ridiculous. And I stand by my initial statement that I made just a couple, weeks ago when this shooting first happened, that honestly, if these cops that were first there responding on the scene had just given their kits and guns to a couple of parents, they probably could have gone in there and saved a hell of a lot more lives than these police officers who were complete cowards in this situation ended up doing. But on top of that, we also have the fact that not only did they arrest her on scene when this was happening, but on top of that, they have been threatening her behind the scenes to not speak to the media about their failures. So here from Newsweek, they say, Uvalde mom who saved kids from school shooting says police threatened her. And they say a mother who ran into Robb Elementary School to rescue her 2 children during a mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas last week says police threatened to violate her probation for speaking about the incident to reporters. And they say after speaking critically about the incident to media outlets, Gomez said an officer threatened to charge her for violating probation on an unrelated charge for obstruction of justice. Obstruction of justice, as if these police officers who have been dipping and dodging accountability at every step throughout this process, and I'll give you more details in terms of how they've been trying to dodge that accountability, but for them to come out and say that this mother who's speaking to the media about their own failures is participating in obstruction of justice, you guys are obstructing justice. We know for a fact that the chief of police, who was the active commanding officer while this shooting was going down, who made the order for his officers to stand down and not go confront the shooter, we know that he hasn't even been cooperating with the Texas Department of Public Safety. So, you guys are actually actively obstructing justice while you're trying to get parents and charge them with obstruction of justice for speaking out to the media. Just complete ghoul shit from all of these officers. But they continue here saying, however, she added that she spoke to a local judge who assured her that she was brave and that she would not face legal repercussions for sharing her story. So, commendable for that judge, I guess. But again, the police are still coming out and trying to silence her. And they say her account comes amid a flurry of similar reports from parents and relatives who said they were on site during the devastating massacre and watched police failed to intervene. And again, now we're going to get into some of the details in terms of how these cops have been repeatedly trying to cover their asses throughout this entire process and actually obstruct justice in a legitimate way, counter to, the claim made against this mother. But here from the Texas Tribune, they say in battered Uvalde, where a police chief is in hiding, grief gives way to calls of accountability. So I wanted to read through some of this. They say, as chief of the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District Police Department, it was his call. They're talking about this guy, Pete Arredondo, who I covered in my video the other week, who's been dodging reporters and dodging the Texas Department of Public Safety. But they say it was his call to wait more than an hour for backup instead of ordering officers on scene to immediately charge the shooter who killed 19 students and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School. The chief of the state police later said this was the wrong decision, period. And again, it's not even up in the air in terms of what is supposed to be the immediate response to police in these mass shooting situations. We also know that this guy, Pete Arredondo, specifically did receive training on what to do in mass shooting situations. And the typical procedure is supposed to be that whatever cops, no matter how well armed you are, no matter what kind of vest that you have on, the first officers on the scene are supposed to go in and immediately confront the shooter as quickly as possible. Your job is not to sit back and wait for some tactical team unit to come in and save the day an hour after the fact. Your job is supposed to be to go in and potentially sacrifice your own life in order to save these children. That's your job. There's no question about it. You have to go in immediately, confront the shooter, and try to take him down. This is like the one instance where the general public support police using their violent instincts, okay, in order to actually go in and kill somebody. But counter to that, I mean, think about all of the instances where police pretend like, oh, I was scared for my life, so I shot this innocent, unarmed black man or black kid in some instances, right? They always use this excuse, oh, I was fearing for my life, so I had no choice but to use lethal force. And then where there's an actual opportunity for them to use lethal force in a situation where everybody across the board understands that this is an instance where police should be using maximum violence. In this case, when it actually comes to being the Rambo hero that cops like to pretend that they are, they completely fail, and they're utter cowards in this situation. So again, completely pathetic, but they continue saying, now Arredondo is a man in hiding as calls for answers and accountability grow louder matter each day. And they say in the weeks since state police signaled him out for blame, Arredondo has hardly been seen. And they say police officers stand guard outside of his home. He has declined to explain his actions, telling a television crew that he staked out his office. He would not do so until after the victims' funerals. And city officials, too, have assisted in the Vanishing Act. They canceled a previously scheduled public ceremony on Tuesday and instead swore in Arredondo in secret for his latest role on the city council. And I'm sure that if you put this up to a vote for the people of Uvalde, Texas, that they would absolutely try to recall this guy and remove him from this position on city council. But they basically swore him in secret, knowing that there would be public backlash in the immediate aftermath of this shooting. But they continue saying even state police complained this week that Arredondo has remained elusive to them, accusing him of not cooperating with the Texas Department of Public Safety investigation into the shooting, a claim that Arredondo has refuted. And they say the New York Times reported on Friday that the chief arrived on scene without a radio, hampering his ability to organize the response. And again, that's not even any legitimate excuse, because the policy, which we know that he underwent this training, the policy is to go in immediately and confront the shooter. So, whether or not you had a radio, that's not necessarily even relevant to this situation. Your job is to go in immediately and confront the shooter. But they continue saying residents here remain in mourning. Each day repeats a cycle of at least 2 funerals followed by processions to the cemetery on the west edge of town. Their grief, however, is giving way to frustration about how local officials have been responding to the tragedy and conversations about how to hold them accountable. And they say for many, this starts with firing Arredondo and overhauling his department, which they believe failed the students it was supposed to keep safe. And they got a quote here saying, "They were cowards," said Salvador Hurtado, a retired farm worker who said Arredondo should lose his job. There was one man with a gun, and they waited and waited. I read the signs on the police cars that they say protect and serve. Where was the protection? And again, a valuable lesson in a moment like this is to understand that the function of the police throughout history and to this day has never been to protect and serve, communities and average working people across the country. Their goal is to protect and serve the interests of capital, okay? They more so protect private property than they protect communities and schools like this. But this is not an aberration. This is not something that is out of the ordinary. This is a demonstration of exactly what the function of police actually is in this country. But they continue saying, but residents here also expressed broader desire for transparency from the city and school district officials, whom they feel have retreated from serving their constituents at a time when they are needed the most. And City Hall has locked its doors during business hours and declined to immediately provide any public records to reporters. So again, who's really obstructing justice in this situation? Is it the mother who's speaking out to the media about the failures of this police department? Or is it, City Hall refusing to give any public records to the public and locking their doors during business hours? But they say the chief of the city police force, Daniel Rodriguez, has also declined to answer questions about his officer's response to the shooting, and a Uvalde CISD official told a reporter falsely that the first school board meeting since the incident would be closed to the public. So they're literally lying to reporters, okay, in order to get them to not show up to a public school meeting. But they continue here saying, at the special meeting Friday, an agenda item allowed the board to terminate Arredondo, and of course, the board declined to do so, and board members did not respond to requests for comments before the meeting. And they finish off here with another quote saying, Lydia Morales, who grew up in Uvalde, said the local government has long been insular, so this is not something new. She feels officials protect each other and give preferential treatment to friends and allies. She criticized Mayor Dawn McLaughlin for initially saying Arredondo would not be sworn in as planned, and Arredondo was subsequently sworn in Monday at City Hall in a secret ceremony. And they say he lied to the community of Uvalde, but shame on Arredondo for even doing that. I can't see how he would have the audacity. So again, I mean, listen, whether it's that mother giving her individual account of the failures of the police, or whether it's the police responding in that moment by putting more pressure and force on the parents who were there trying to save their own kids than they were on the actual shooter. I mean, top to bottom throughout this entire process, we've seen a perfect demonstration of the failures of police to live up to what they are supposedly doing in this country, okay? They are not protecting and serving. They are the violent arm of the state, okay? Their goal is to use that state violence in order to go and, harass black teenagers in school, whether they're school resource officers or outside of school, in just average, day-to-day scenarios. Their goal is to protect private property. Their goal is not to actually go in and risk their lives. In fact, we know, according to a Supreme Court ruling, that police literally do not even have a constitutional requirement to risk their lives to save somebody in a situation. So people got to ask some pretty fundamental questions in terms of what is the role that we want police to have in this country, and take another look at the so-called radical proposal to defund the police, because even in Uvalde, Texas specifically, 40% of their entire city budget goes to the police force. 40%, okay? And they waited over an hour to go in to confront a school shooter. All right, they have a specific tactical SWAT team that they're spending millions and millions of dollars on for a situation like this if it were to unfold. And again, this is because the police are not actually making us safer. Okay, we have record police budgets in the United States. We have record amounts of cops. We have record amounts of incarcerated people sitting in our jails. Okay, 25% of the world's prison population, 4% of the world's total population. If more cops and more guns actually was a solution to public safety, then the United States would be the safest country on earth, and it wouldn't even be close. But clearly that's not the case, because again, police, their role is not to enhance public safety. It's not to protect and serve communities. It is being a violent arm for the capitalist class.